Hello, Booktube. Time for another Sunday or Monday reads, whichever way this comes out. I'm going to try and make this the no edit reads. You might laugh at that, thinking that this guy never particularly pays any attention to actual stuff. But whenever I put text up or there's a picture stuck there, that means I've had to put it on my computer and do all this stuff. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that this week. Fingers crossed. Depends on how badly I mess up. So yes. So Sunday reads. What have I finished reading? What am I reading at the moment? And what am I going to read going forward? There's a little bit of all those. Let's start off by what I finished. Shadow Lingers by Glen Cook. Kind of grimdark fantasy novel. I finished that shortly after, probably the next day after filming what turned out to be my Monday reads. Another installment in the Black Company. This is installment number 2 in the Black Company group of hard-bitten mercenaries who are working for a dark lady. And the great surprise and delight of this one was most definitely a secondary character, a new character who has a whole arc throughout the whole thing. This innkeeper, cowardly, kind of craven innkeeper, Shed Marin. And that was just really a delight, a really complex, very flawed, gray, interesting character. Just one of these things of like, I have not read enough into fantasy that you can get a character who is just that interesting. So really enjoyed Shadows Lingers. The other thing that I finished, which I have to admit in the end, I don't think I didn't enjoy as much, was Jonny Appleseed by Joshua Whitehead. Story of a indigiqueer two-spirit Johnny, who is trying to get back to the reservation for the funeral of a stepfather who he doesn't really care about, but is that's the occasion for a lot of kind of flashbacks and ruminations on his life up until that part. It is a very sexy, very not risque, very kind of like, balls deep kind of excuse the not double entendre there. It's a very explicit look, a very raw look at this thing. In a way it is raw and explicit. There is another sense that Joshua Whitehead, I guess this is his first novel and he's been a poet before that, and there's a way that it is sort of stilted and at kind of at arm's length because of that poetic language. I have to admit, I didn't find the poetic language actually that great in the novel. I thought it wasn't that exciting or that interesting. There wasn't enough there to carry the book through, and there certainly is not a plot, which I wouldn't complain about if the fact that the language was stilted and felt at arm's length, a bit more at arm's length for me, at least from my perspective. I am not the guy, I'm not the person that Joshua Whitehead is writing this book for. But all I can go is by my own reaction to it. And I kind of, stilted and kind of at arm's length is how I ended up going. It's something where I'm interested to see what happens next. This is like a first novel. And interested to see what, after you've gotten that first novel out, sometimes that's when you can kind of you'll grow into stuff, and you'll maybe drop some of the things. The kind of what seems to me pseudo poetical bits of this didn't work for me. They cluttered it and made it feel stiff. So yeah. Can't be a winner at all times. So from there, oh yes, I am continuing with Legends of Vancouver by Pauline Johnson. I read this very, very slowly because I have not done my autofocus. See if I can do my autofocus. I have to lock the autofocus or else everything goes in and out, and I have to remember that. Pauline Johnson's Legends of Vancouver, 1911 work, as told to her by Chief Joe Capilano, Sapulak, I think is actually his proper name, and these are kind of, legends of before the white man, before colonization. And looking into the history of this, I think I mentioned the last time, Sapaluk was somebody who was agitating for the honoring of treaty rights, of the restoration of potlatch. And I was worried that this was going to be kind of a romanticization of kind of, the lost native, which is something that did happen at the time. But no, Pauline Johnson is of native ancestry herself. Her father was Mohawk. She ended up in Vancouver, across the continent here, which is where she sadly died at the age of 51. But these are stories of, this is stories of resistance. These are weapons. This is sharp stuff that you can see is while it's being presented to a white audience, I do get the sense that this is also stuff to say, hey, we need to fight. We need to fight for our children's future. We need to hold on to our traditions. We need to see, how important something like the potlatch, which comes up in a lot of the stories, was and still is to our culture, even if it is outlawed and being repressed at that very moment in 1911. So yeah, really, really enjoying these stories. They have this kind of a sharpness to them, which I wasn't expecting. Because Pauline Johnson, it's one of these things of you get as a Canadian, you hear about her, and it's like, oh yeah, it's one of the kind of the old time Canadians. It's like Emily Carr, who I've also not read yet, and you think of it as just as like, oh, this is the stuff that we kind of peddle to the tourists, and yeah, it's the stuff I should probably have learned in school, but I never did. It's like that kind of, it's wallpaper, and it's like when you actually encounter a work like this, and wow, it's living. That is something that is really, really tremendous, and I'm really happy about that. That it's something that still seems to, at least I am finding interesting. So yeah, that's one of my continued reads. And this week, because of Rick MacDonald's Booktube spin, I put a bunch of books on my list that were Victorian, because I never willingly, or at least I've never consciously participated in Victober before. Something that's hosted by a number of hosts. The one I know mostly is Katie at Books and Things, and who has an extremely deep and wide reading in Victorian literature, and someone you should totally check out if you do not know her and you're interested in Victorian literature. She's always got really interesting authors to talk about and stuff like that, and interesting things to say. But I said, okay, I'll let chance decide, and I put a whole bunch of kind of Victorian things on the list, heavily weighted towards Anthony Trollope, which of course meant that that's one of those choices came up, which was Trollope, a biography of Trollope by Victoria Glendinning. This is like, I think, 1991 or 1992. I'm not going to look at it right now. A biography of the great Victorian novelist who I have read. I just had a year of just reading a Trollope novel a month, and that was just so, I so enjoyed that. That was so great. I just love being with Trollope. Now, this came up as my first Booktube spin. This is where you select 20 books, number them from 1 to 20. Rick spins the wheel, and whatever number comes up, that's the book you read. This is what came up. So this means that, this came up. So that means the book just before that is the one I'm actually reading at the moment, which is Anthony Trollope's An Autobiography, which is a book. It's really interesting. I don't know if this was a common practice in Victorian times, but I think it's like in 1876, somewhere, like he still had like about 12 novels to go. He kind of took a little bit of time and wrote an autobiography. It's sort of a writer's autobiography of his work, which he then shelved it away, and it was published after he died in 1883. And it's a book that's kind of credited with destroying his reputation as an author, as a serious author of literature, because in the book he dares to say, I write for money, and if a book isn't successful monetarily, I deemed it not a success. That he had very much kind of a workmanlike attitude towards writing. He had a diary which he tracked his word count every day, and if he fell behind, well, that was a shame. That was a blot. It was a blister in his eye, as he puts it in here. So this is how he, because he couldn't quit his day job. He was worked for the British Post Office, doing a lot of traveling around, kind of auditing everybody, like various post offices, kind of books and things like that. At least at the beginning of his career, riding around at horseback, and then later, because of with the railway and stuff like that, and kind of coming up in the hierarchy, he was doing a lot of his travel by railway. And this picture on the front here, which of course have put the autofocus in the wrong place. That picture there is of him sitting in one of the cars of the train with his little tablet and writing. And that is, he said, is how he wrote Barchester Towers, one of the first of the Barchestershire series of nothings. Kelly at Books and Not Thinking has now got me self-conscious about how I say that too. But yeah, that's like, he wrote whenever he had the chance, and he was able to kind of write his I think it's 2 novels a year or something like that. Just tremendous rate. But he's like it's a job, and if I was making shoes or something like that, people aren't going to expect me to wait till inspiration hits for when I'm going to make the shoes. Same thing with writing books, is how he put it, and this really brought him down. You have the kind of romantic artist in the garret, especially in vogue at that point, and this destroyed all that career. And indeed, there is a quote. Oh God, it's at the beginning. Did I already read this? At the very beginning of here, that his success as a novelist, it's like it's 1900 and nobody reads him anymore. Thankfully that changed, and it's something you can read now. There's really interesting stuff here on his mother. His mother came back from America, where they're kind of a doomed thing there. His father was just was a completely failed man, was dying, and she took up the profession of a novelist, of writing novels. And while her son's kind of like a little bit kind of condescending to her, obviously she probably wasn't at the height of someone like her son. She was writing novels while then also nursing her dying son, her dying husband, and pretty soon after that, her dying daughter. But she was the main source of income, and she kept on writing those novels. And I think she started at the age of 50 and ended up with like 114 works to her name. So someone who, you can see where the son may have gotten a lot of that. It's just at the beginning here, it's just amazing exactly how miserable of a life Trollope was having at the beginning of his life, like up until I think he says like the age of 26, and he went to Ireland as work as a kind of a mobile postal survey clerk there. His life was just miserable. He was poor, and this is back in the old days when you were poor in a rich school, and you were just despised and you were looked down upon. I'm really looking forward to getting into Glen. This is making me so much look forward to getting into this, because Trollope seems like a very kind of odd fellow here. A very kind of he does not get along with people. There's a lot of difficulties, and we're getting it all from his point of view. So it's all a bit of a puzzle to him. But whether he's just like he's this big burly guy who's also sort of a geek or a nerd in a way of trying to think about modern parlance. He also loves hunting. That's one thing. He gets to Ireland and he discovers his love of hunting, which I think is just the physicality of it. You get the sense of the riding, of all that. But he confesses in here that like, well, maybe I put like, I put a lot. I always love putting a hunting chapter in all my novels, whether they needed it or not. And it's like having read a fair hunk of Trollope now. It's like, yeah, there's always a hunting chapter in a Trollope novel, and I mean, he always writes them really excitingly because he obviously loves what he's writing about. But sometimes you're like, why is this in here? So yeah, I'm really enjoying this. That's the thing. I think that's the thing you love. If you get into Trollope, you just love being in his company. And this autobiography is like that. He is very kind of like, I got this amount of money for it. I demanded this account, from it. He's a very nuts and bolts guy, but there's also a thing in here of how much it shines through about how much he loves his characters, which I think is one of the secrets to why he still gets read today, is he loves his characters, and he's very rigorous. There's a thing in the start here of him as an embryonic. It's like, well, nobody wanted to play with me as a boy, so I would go around and I would build castles in the air, which were stories. And in those stories, he was the hero. And while he never made himself like good looking and stuff like that, women would recognize how clever he was. And he always tried to be kind and generous and noble and just as a character. And he sort of carried that along into his novels, even though he no longer was the center. He was no longer the hero of the story. It's like his characters are also always trying to be kind of that kind and noble and just. And he says like, well, I probably never as good as the hero version of myself I put in those novels. But it was something that I aspired to. So yeah, I'm really enjoying that at the moment. And the last thing that I'll pull up in just a second once I unlock my phone is and the last thing that I am there's a focus on there, then there's a focus back on me. There gonna have to work on this autofocus thing. The last thing is I am listening to The Absolute Book by Elizabeth Knox, a 2021 I guess urban fantasy novel. It's like, it's a fantasy in a contemporary setting, like we all know here and now. I'm not quite sure what I should really look up, get my terms straight. It is, holy crap. I'm like about 24% into this, and even to sum up what I have read so far would be impossible. Knox is this is like, I think, her 11th novel, but she is weaving kind of such an interesting tapestry of a book that starts out with the main character, Taryn. Her sister gets run over on purpose by a man, Webb, when she's 19, and her this is her older sister by a few years, and kills her, and she's kind of consumed by kind of anger, and things from that. She does something about that. Webb ends up dead, and that seems to unlock all sorts of just bizarre things. It's kind of there's another world. There's transportations. There's a talking bird. It's I'm really I'm really enjoying myself, but it's one of those books where I feel like I'm holding on by my fingernails to just keep up with it, and okay, rewind. Oh, what did they just say? Okay, I got it now. Hunan. Oh, okay, I know where we are. Sort of. But the sister was reading, had her book with her, which she was really interested in, all these kind of majestic kind of conspiracy novels and stuff like that. You think of like, more complex versions of something like maybe the Da Vinci's Code, which I have not read. And indeed, the Da Vinci Code does get kind of name checked in here, but you get this idea of conspiracies, of secrets, of a box called the Firestarter, which maybe caused the fire at the Library of Alexandria. Taryn herself is someone who has written a book about all the terrible things that happen to books in libraries and stuff, like insects and moisture and wars and fires. And there's a quotation in the book about how a conqueror, he invaded a city, and he wasn't interested in looting, but he wanted to keep this city down. So what he did is he destroyed their knowledge base, he destroyed their libraries, and he destroyed their bridges, because he didn't want to just rob them and then for them to rise back up. He wanted to cripple them, and the best way to cripple them was to cripple their like transportation, and the other way was to rip out their knowledge base. And you have a sense that this book is I get the sense, I get the kind of the vague sense that this is what this, the kind of the themes of what this book is about, in the context of I think, you know, thinking about Susan Orlean, about the threat to libraries and to knowledge in the modern age, and the control of knowledge, and the warping of knowledge, of fake news, and all the bizarre magical thinking and conspiracy theories that people seem to be kind of infected with or polluted their minds with. That's my vague riffing off of what I'm just barely getting at, scraping at the surface of this really interesting book. I almost think of David Mitchell and the Bone Clock, but this is probably a little bit more genre than David Mitchell, who did get pretty genre-y there. But yeah. So another interesting book, and now I've hit my, you know, just a little bit past 20-minute mark, so I know it's time to stop, because this seems to be the natural length for my Sunday reads. I hope you're having a good reading time. I'm having a good reading time. I'm really enjoying my glasses. Suddenly everything's very crisp. I got this new phone, and it's like, wow, this phone is very, very crisp now. I didn't think it was. I thought it was like okay before, but then I got my glasses, and it's like, oh wow, things are very clear. I need a shave. See, this is the thing, is before I was blind and semi-blind, and I just didn't notice details, and so I didn't have to clean up for my videos. Not that I've started now. All right, I'll leave it there. More videos later.